Hello, everyone, and welcome to the project Lifecycle. My name is Renee Bergstresser, and I'm a software training consultant with our education department here at ConnectWise. I'm joined today by
Mitchell Rollo, also a software training consultant here at ConnectWise.
We're very excited to get into all things projects today. We're going to be taking a high-level look at 4 really important concepts that should hopefully help you all out as you're delivering projects in the future. So on our agenda, we're going to start off, Mitch is actually going to take us through, kick off this content with a review of the project creation process. So the all-important handoff, starting with the all-important handoff from sales and moving all the way through the use of products and templates to build out your work plans. Then once the project's created, it's really essential that we start assigning the tasks out to our different team members. And how do you know who should be working on this project? How do you know who's available? And how do you set up that accountability for them so that we can deliver this on time and under budget? Well, I'll get into some of our easiest methods for dispatching out work effectively. And then throughout the life of the project, it's really important to ensure that everything's running smoothly. We're completing work based on the agreed time frame. And for that, Mitch is going to cover some reports and also some workflow automation to help make sure that everything is staying on track. And then lastly, projects tend to have more complicated billing, either because of your needs or your customers' needs. Sometimes it's because it's a longer time frame or because there's just more work involved or more money involved. But I'll review the basic finance settings and for projects and how we handle invoicing for fixed fee work, which we have some really unique options for projects that we might not have in other areas of Manage.
All right, so like Renee mentioned, I wanted to start us off with project creation, an idea that sounds simple, but for any of us that have done it in practice, it is not. And that reason is because projects are complicated. There's a lot of people involved, both within your company and possibly on the customer's side as well. There's many moving parts involving phases and tasks. All of those phases and tasks have budgets associated with them, both time and then costs and revenue expectations on top of that. Building all of this from scratch is extremely time consuming. I know I've done it, and now I try to avoid it as much as possible. Not only because I value my time, but I know I make mistakes. The more manual steps I'm doing, the more chance that I'm going to have a manual error in there somewhere. And little mistakes building out the project plan can potentially derail the whole thing further on down the line. And I do not want that. Good news, we actually have a couple different tools available to you to help create these projects more consistently and in less time. And ultimately, what we would need to do is connect the sales side to our service delivery. Just about all of our customer-facing projects started by selling the project to the customer. That sale is tracked within ConnectWise Manage as an opportunity. We can then take all that information we've gathered during the sales process on that opportunity and transition it smoothly and consistently from the opportunity over to the project, making sure that there's a nice link between the two and reusing a lot of that detail so we don't need to manually re-enter it from scratch every time we create a project. So here we are now looking at an opportunity I had put together for a project. I can tell at a glance that it's for a project because when I look over here on the right-hand side, I can see I have a bundle up here at the top and a whole lot of different service items underneath. This is actually a representation of my project work plan. This is a phase of the project, and all those service items we see down below are different tasks associated with the project itself. Now, once this opportunity has been won, we're going to need to convert this over to the next step. In this case, like I said, I did sell a project, so I want to choose project here in this dropdown. Now, the steps that follow here can vary depending on exactly what your process looks like, both for the project creation and for your project quoting. So with that in mind, I want to hear some feedback from all of you. How detailed are your labor estimates for your project quotes? Give me an idea of how you might construct a labor estimate for your project quote. Let me know in the chat or that question pod. I want to kind of get a feel for our audience today. That'll help guide us later on so we can better tailor our content to how you are quoting for your projects today. So, two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum that I hear fairly often from partners is they either show a lot of detail up front. In fact, they may have a technical resource working the opportunity with the customer up front to help scope out the project from the get-go. This helps them ensure a better, more accurate project further on down the line. And that scoping could get all the way into an actual project work plan itself on the quote, similar to what I was looking at in that previous opportunity. In that case, we want to use something called phase bundles to build out our project by adding that phase bundle to the opportunity itself, like my previous example. The other end of the spectrum is we don't get too detailed during the actual quoting process. We come up with a rough estimate of hours. I don't know exactly what steps are involved in this project, but based on the customer's needs, I'm going to need, say, 40 hours to complete this overall. Once I've quoted and sold that, those 40 hours are going to make it to my project team. They'll decide how best to utilize that time to deliver on what was sold. Those are kind of the two alternatives: very detailed work plan, or just a rough estimate that we'll use further on down the line. Both are fine, but depending on which end of the spectrum your sales team leans towards, we have two different methods you might use to create these projects from opportunities. And the two examples I see, one I mentioned, which is using phase bundles. What these allow you to do is define the entire project plan from the get-go on the opportunity itself. So if you've already discussed with the customer exactly which specific phases and tasks and steps need to be completed to implement what you're selling, use that information, put it on the opportunity so we don't need to re-enter it later. These phase bundles are used to create phases and project tickets from the bundle during conversion. So we can convert the opportunity and have our project work plan ready and waiting for us based on what was sold. One nice added benefit is the estimated cost and revenue on our opportunity itself, how much we expected this product to cost, and how much we expected to bring in. That's what we quoted it for. That information is carried over as well. So 3 months from now, when we finish up that project, we can actually do a direct comparison and see, all right, how much are we billing for? How much did it cost? And what does that compare to what we expected? Having that comparison ready and available is going to empower your team to better quote for projects in the future. I saw someone mention that they build out their quotes from previous projects. This is another powerful tool you can use when you're building out those quotes by looking at your past projects and seeing how close were you to those revenue and cost estimates that you had initially. The other side of things is project templates. If you're not building out the whole project work plan and you're just quoting for a rough number of hours, well, you still want to have some form of template available for your service delivery team, the project team that actually delivers on what is sold, but it doesn't necessarily make its way onto the opportunity itself. This is where project templates come into play. If you plan on using project templates, you still need to quote for the labor. That still needs to happen. That's where that lump sum of labor comes into play I was talking about earlier. And we'll define that budget on the opportunity. Then during the conversion process, we can apply the project template so we get the proposed work plan applied automatically, not as part of the opportunity, but further on down the process. Then your project team will take the budgeted hours and divide that up over our template. So we can see how much time we quoted to the customer, and we can use that time to then assign out to the various project tasks we have, so we can use that time to its fullest over our proposed plan. So let's take a look now at these two different methods, what they look like in action. Here I am back on an opportunity, and I want to add a bundle class product to define our work plan. I can do that from the forecast, and I want to search for a product, specifically a bundle. So I have a security bundle right here, and I'll add that on. This bundle has several different components. Some of these components may be physical or digital products that I need to purchase and deliver. Other of these components, such as the install, job setup, and some of the others down below, these are actual service tasks associated with this project. We can combine all those together into one bundle, since all of this goes into delivering the project. And specifically on those service side, this is the important part for building out our work plan. First, they have to be a service class product. That's what allows us to define the billing. Specifically, the time is going to be billed eventually as a fixed fee for this amount. So by building out this on the opportunity itself, not only are we creating a consistent work plan with what was sold, we're also defining how this time will eventually be invoiced. So this kind of connects the whole cycle from sales through to project delivery all the way to invoicing, guaranteeing it'll be the same. We quoted them for a fixed fee at 450 per hour, and at the end of the day, when the project is closed out, because we had this information and we carried it through, that's how this will be invoiced. The other piece that we will need is on our bundle itself. It needs this little flag right here that designates it as a phase bundle. This is what allows the bundle to convert over to a project phase during our opportunity conversion. And that opportunity conversion, like I said, started at earlier, you click that convert button, we'll say we want to convert to a project, and then we have several decisions to make as we process. First is this an add-on to an existing project, or are we creating a brand new one? In this case, I'll create a brand new one. And then we can bring over all the different products associated with it. So in this case, the product I'm converting actually had a couple different phases listed on here. If you quoted for multiple different services on your quote, so let's say you sold a contract along with a bundle a project to implement that contract, well, those will need to be converted to separate records. So here you can pick and choose which products need to go where. Then you'll get a summary of the time and the time, expense, product, cost, and revenue. Don't need to make any changes here since we want this to match exactly what was sold. And then the last thing we need to decide is the estimated start and end date and what project type. Once we're done, it'll go ahead and build out our project plan. And as you can see here, the project plan I have over here on my left looks eerily similar to the phase bundle products I have on the right. In fact, it's going to be an exact replica. This is going to guarantee that consistency and save a massive amount of time. If your sales team already put in the effort to sell all of this level of detail, we want to make sure that my project team, A, doesn't have to re-enter all those from scratch. Building out this project from scratch would take a while, but it also matches exactly the phases, the tasks, even the budgets and billing associated with them. Now, the other method I talked about is going to be with project templates. If we are just quoting for a lump sum of hours, we still need a way to define the work plans of our projects. This is where templates play. So here I have a risk assessment project that I do for some of my customers buying security services from me. And if I move over to my work plan, I have a detailed work plan built out with phases, subphases, and tasks divided into the different categories of my risk assessment. And you'll notice that my budget here is blank because I want to go ahead and quote them out a lump sum of hours and then divide that up based on the conversations they had with the sales team and the amount of hours they purchased. Figure out where those hours should be going. If you don't have any project templates right now or any phase bundle products for that matter, and you're not sure where to start, you can actually import both of these, both products and project templates, from our marketplace. This way, this gives you a chance to, rather than start from scratch, take a look at some examples and build from there. If you like the risk assessment project template I had, you can search for CW risk assessment or risk management right here and import it into your system. So how do I actually apply this in practice? Again, here's an example of a opportunity that did not have any bundle associated with it. I had 4, let's say, pieces of hardware here and 45 hours of labor that are going to be needed as part of this project. I will go ahead and convert, and the beginning process will be the same. The main difference is when I arrive at the project screen, before I save it, you'll notice the option to import a work plan. If I click that, I can choose from all of my project templates that I have available. Here, I went ahead and chose an AV automation and integration template. Then when it's applied, I can see I have my 45 hours listed up here at the top, and then phases and tasks down below.
Well, now that we have our project created, we have our task list filled out for us, we're really ready to go. It's essential that we start assigning out these tasks because now that the customer has signed on the dotted line, they're going to expect delivery really as soon as possible. So the sooner we can get these items dispatched out, the better. I wanted to start off with a question, which is, how do you track your team's availability? Now, this can come into play in a couple different ways. It could determine the type of projects you take on. If you've ever had to say no to a sale because your team just doesn't have the bandwidth to tackle it right now, maybe there's a lot of vacation hours going on, or some people are, maybe you're down a couple colleagues and you need to rehire for those roles. How do you currently keep track of your team's availability? Yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult to keep track of your team's availability, and I'm glad that someone suggested they actually use the dispatch portal because that's what we'd recommend too. However, what's great about projects is that projects have their own dedicated dispatch portal that works a little bit differently from what you would use for your help desk, but it's equally as beneficial and it can help prevent you from running into issues where maybe you assumed that your team had more availability and now you run into issues delivering on time. Okay, so others are saying that maybe you use the dispatch portal, you struggle with this currently, you have multiple meetings with your team per week just to make sure that everyone's on track. Awesome. So in-person touch-ins. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, there are really three critical pieces to resource scheduling. And the first is really the team. Who should be working on this issue? And that's usually based on their skill set, their role at your organization, and when are they available to work on this? We discussed that sometimes it's in-person meetings, sometimes it's our dispatch portal. These are different ways that we try to navigate and control and ensure we have visibility on who's available and when. The second bit is the work plan, which Mitch already showed us. We can use project templates, we can use bundle class products, different ways to build out those task lists of the details of what needs to be done for this to be successfully delivered. And super important that Mitch touched on this as well is the budgeted hours. How long do we expect this to take? Because if we're looking at our member calendars, we're considering time off requests, the number of team members we have, the budget hours really allow us to dispatch effectively and also ensure that we're not overloading our team. And then lastly, the dispatch portal, which this is where you can double check the availability of your team and really easily assign out responsibilities and create accountability around this work plan being completed. So with those in mind, we want to work on optimizing our scheduling. And the first way, the best way to start off this process is by assigning a project team. So right now I'm just on the main project screen, but if I click over into the team tab, I'll have the ability to assign a team. Now I could go in here and I could assign individual members one by one, but what's really handy about project boards is that within the project board setup table, you have the ability to go ahead and define teams. So you may have a certain group of colleagues that is more familiar with completing customer onboarding. That's likely a very different skill set than someone with completing a physical security installation. So we can build out these different teams so we know exactly which resources should work on this. In this case, I have built out a team in my setup tables called Physical Security Projects. And when I click that team, all 5 members are automatically added to the project. Now, one more thing I wanted to call out on this screen is the project role. Now, the project role is super important because it controls access to this project, and it actually works with their security roles. So it's definitely something to look into. You want to make sure that the right people can make changes to, let's say, the finance tab of this, how it bills, whereas not everyone on the team has that same level of access. So another thing about adding in this project team is that it's going to save us a ton of time when we start dispatching, which to do so, let's go back to the project work plan. Here we have all of our task lists. We've already assigned our team. Now the next thing we want to do is go ahead and open the dispatch portal, which we can do from the More dropdown on the work plan tab. Now because we took the time to set up our team, you're going to see that this dispatch portal has everything we need. First thing is I wanted to call attention to the bottom half here where we have our work plan listed. So instead of our dispatch portal for our service board, we have this entire work plan for this individual project listed on the bottom half of the split screen. The top only has those 5 team members that are part of the project team assigned. So now it's really easy for us to simply drag and drop these pieces to assign them to different team members. Now I'm adjusting the time here because this task doesn't take the default half hour, which what's really nice is I can always reference the budgeted hours that I set up on the work plan so that as I'm scheduling, I'm not going to block someone off for 10 hours of work and expect them to get through it in 3 hours. So I'd simply go through, dispatch them out in order, making sure that each task is completed at the right time by members that have availability.
Okay, so now that we've seen how projects are created and then scheduled out, let's go ahead and fast forward a bit. Let's jump into an example where now we have some projects in progress, and let's see what happens from there. And before I do, I have another question for all of you here. How often do your projects go exactly as planned? I see LOL in all capitals. That's pretty accurate. Never. Yep, it happens as well. Never and an LOL. Good combination there. So that's probably why a lot of us are here today. We try and prepare our projects as best as possible, but regardless of how prepared we are, things they rarely go smoothly. There's always going to be bumps, unexpected twists and turns. And the best thing we can really do from a project management standpoint is be prepared for that so we can quickly and easily respond. And if something does happen, based on what's happening, we already have a response available so we can go ahead and start correcting things sooner rather than later. And now I want to share a couple tools I think are very useful for this. So first step in correcting these problems that are going off track is identifying when it's happening before it happens. So here I am looking at an example project that is currently in progress. And I can actually tell you a lot of problems with this project before I even go anywhere else. Just glancing at this work plan, I can pick out 4 different things that are problematic, most of which are right down here in my work plan itself. First, the project status is a very easy way to enable your project team to bring issues to your attention at a glance. By simply changing the status of the project tickets and tasks they're assigned to, we can have status indicators listed alongside that status that has a nice, bright, easy call out to identify potential issues. In fact, I can see 2 potential issues they've flagged here for me. Helps me as a project manager stay on top of things. 2 more problems. Moving over here, we can actually leverage that budget information that I talked about setting up earlier on to help us better prepare for those potential problems. Because we budgeted a set amount of time up front, I can quickly call out when there are problems. On my second ticket in my second phase there, I can see my team has already entered 4 hours on that ticket, even though we only budgeted 2 hours. That's a problem. We have it highlighted in red. That's something that it's going to throw off our project in the long run. It's likely going to make us go over budget unless we can do something to respond to that. And the fact is that ticket is still open, so we may end up spending even more time on this than we want. Another one column over. I can see my first ticket there. I've only entered 2.78 hours, so we're still way under budget. We budgeted 12, but I can see I scheduled 14 hours of work. So while I'm not over budget yet, I can see I'm planning to go over budget. And again, it's called out for me in red, so I can be aware of this as a project manager. So if I do need to make a change, maybe bring in another resource or just let someone know, hey, this is going to go over budget, the sooner we can be aware of these potential issues, the better we can respond to them and the more options we have as far as responding to them goes. Another thing I wanted to call out that I forgot to add a call out for is up at the top, I can see that there are some scheduled conflicts. Someone who's booked on here, so these schedule entries right here, they're double booked somewhere. And that's another problem that we'll probably want to take a look at. I can actually click in here and see exactly where those scheduled conflicts are. And what's even better, not only does this project work plan call out information for me, it also allows me to make a lot of useful changes without having to dive into each individual ticket and task to make updates. I can add new tickets and new phases, I can update the statuses, I can even assign resources and review time entries. These 4 hours where I'm over, I can actually just click that number 4 and see all of those time entries and find out what's going on here. Why did we end up spending double the time we anticipated on this specific ticket? So we want to make sure that we have the information you need as a project manager in front of you as easily accessible as possible. Another tool we have that I like to call out is our Project Gantt tab. If you guys are more visual people and you don't want to see a list of when things are scheduled, but you want to see a nice timeline, this will go ahead and illustrate that for you. I can see my project plan listed out with our estimated and scheduled dates, phases, and tickets. And if I scroll over to the right, I can see the timeline of the project, the phases, and the tickets. This includes any dependencies. Everything that's been finished will be checked off. And I can actually see I have a milestone on here that I've missed, which calls it out in red. So again, a lot of useful tools here to help you stay on top of your projects and ideally catch these issues before they get out of hand. So I can see here I have a phase and several tasks that should have been closed by now that have not. That's something I'm going to need to address. Another ticket down here that one more day and we're going to be behind if we don't close that out. The work plan is fantastic for keeping you and your team up to date on the current status of the project. Unfortunately, they are not the only people who need to be kept up to date on the current status of the project. Oftentimes, the customer wants to stay on top of things as well. So we have a report that I think does a very good job summarizing projects for them so they can see what they need to see. Up at the top, they can see their overall status of the project, as well as how far along it is. This percentage complete can be based on something you manually enter. It can be based on the percentage of closed tickets, or it can be based on the percentage of the budget that has been used. So a couple different options here depending on how you determine percentage complete of your projects. Additionally, they can see a breakdown of what's been completed, what issues there are, and what work they have scheduled coming up, along with a little key letting them know what these little callouts mean. Rather than relying on your team spending the time to run this report and honestly remembering to go and do that, instead, every time you start up a new project with a customer, if you want to keep them in the loop with the project, you can schedule this report to be sent to them on a regular recurring basis. That way they're kept up to date and your team isn't bogged down with more admin work sharing this information with the customer themselves. Another tool I'd like to call out that most of you are probably familiar with, but on the service side of ConnectWise Manage, is workflow rule automation. Projects actually have a lot of different aspects to them that I think workflow rules are very relevant for. First big one that isn't relevant to tickets at all is the budget. We can go ahead and monitor the project budget so we can be alerted as that budget is filling up. So if I say we're at 80% of our budget, I can send an alert to the project manager so they can review and make sure that the 20% of budget we have remaining is enough to close this project out without going over. And if it's not, we're able to at least start addressing that before we've gone over budget. If your projects require down payment before work can begin, what we don't want is the customer to make that down payment and then work sits idle for a little while because the finance person who collected the payment forgot to let the project manager know. Rather than rely on someone to pass some information along, we can have Manage monitor your projects and their associated down payments. So as soon as that down payment comes in, project manager is notified and work can begin on the project. If your project is approaching its estimated end date and it's still open, that's another situation similar to the budget where I may want someone to come in and review and see that maybe the week remaining, is that going to be enough for us to finish on time? If not, again, now we have at least a little bit of time to start planning for how we want to address going beyond our estimated end date. I heard someone mention shipping delays. This is another big issue. And well, workflow rules can help with that as well. What we can't do is make the products get here faster, but we can cut down on that time delay from when they get here and the interested party is aware they've arrived. We can make it almost instant, same day. As soon as those products are received, it doesn't matter how busy that person receiving these products are. They've received the products, the project manager now knows, so they can begin work right away without any further delay, since the shipping delays out of your hands, but once they come in, no reason to have any delay. And last one I want to call out is the project is approaching the estimated end date, so we can do this for both the project itself and the scheduled tickets to make sure that we do have work scheduled in the future. And here's what a workflow rule that incorporates all of these might look like. I've created one single workflow rule here for project management, and it is composed of all those different pieces I just talked about. I'm tracking the project budget, and as I hit different thresholds, I have different actions associated with it, alerting the responsible team members that, hey, we are hitting that budget. I'm tracking my down payment, I'm tracking my products, I'm tracking my scheduled work, and the estimated end date. All of it being done automatically for me now. So these are 7 less tasks I need to worry about as a project manager. I'm letting ConnectWise Manage do all these manual check-ins for me.
I really appreciate all the call outs about the marketplace, because one thing you might not have picked up on as we were on that screen when Mitch was showing us the ability we can download not only projects and products, but also project boards, also workflow rules. So there's so much that we have available to us in the marketplace that you don't need to build from scratch. But next, we really want to cover billing projects, because we know this can be complicated. You may have specific needs, your customer may have specific needs. So I wanted to take some time to review the options within Manage that can help you handle this process. So projects do have some additional options. The main one that I'm going to cover in this is progress billing that can make it easier for you to fit larger scale, more expensive work into your customers' budgets. It's also really important that we set our team up for success, not just our service team, but especially our finance team, by having the correct billing settings on our base project and potentially even marking out some phases that need to bill separately. So we'll get into more detail on that, but I wanted to kind of ask everyone, is everything wrapped up in one fixed fee? I noticed that come through our chat that sometimes there's a fixed fee for projects. Do you ever run into issues with scope creep that make a project that was fixed fee a whole lot more time consuming and way less profitable than it should have been? But before we get into some of those, go ahead and please throw in, I will have a discussion slide where I'll address what you're all adding to the chat right now, so please go ahead and add those. But I did want to take a moment to just quickly cover the billing methods that we have available. So within the finance tab of a project, you'll see this section, and I can even zoom in here where you'll see the billing information for the base project. Now this is going to really, at this point in time, all of the tickets on this project will bill in the way we've set it up here because it's handling the overarching billing rules for this project work. Now in this case, I've set it up for fixed fee, the billing method that is, but there are actually 4 different billing methods that you can choose from, and they all have settings that are going to be very important to your finance team and how work is completed on this project. The first is actual rates. Now, actual rates, the billing, the actual invoice you create is going to be based on the time entries. Now, that's the member's role and their work type multiplied by the number of hours that they submit. So that's how it'll bill, truly based on each time entry, role, and work type rules. Now, override rate is similar. That's also based on time entries, so the number of hours that have been entered on this project. However, override rate ignores the individual member settings, like their work role with the organization and the work type, so the type of work that they're doing, like after hours or remote. Now, what that does is it takes the total number of hours and it multiplies it by a set rate. So a really common example is a consulting project where every hour will bill at $225, regardless of who's completing the work. Next option is fixed fee, which that's the example I'm going to dig into a little bit more later. But essentially, if you're thinking a flat fee for a project, that's fixed fee. No matter how much time is entered on this project, no matter who's doing the work, when they're completing the work, it's going to bill the customer, in this case, $20,000 for this project, no matter what. Now that's where we can get into some trouble with scope creep, because if our team's not logging that much time, this could be a really profitable project. However, if we end up sinking a ton of time into here, we could see those margins start to get slim. Now, not to exceed is pretty similar to fixed fee, but it's almost like a blend of actual rates and fixed fee, because not to exceed, it essentially bills actual rates, so based on the member time entered, their work role and work type, but up until we reach a cap. So if this $20,000 was actual rates instead of, was not to exceed instead of fixed fee, if we entered $10,000 worth of labor on this, it would bill the client $10,000. Now, if we entered $25,000 worth of labor on this, it would only bill the client $20,000. So now that we've covered the billing methods that we set on the project, this is going to determine whether or not that final invoice is going to be determined by the time or a set value or maybe a value that has a cap. How do you actually handle invoicing for this project work? Okay, so I noticed that some people do the flat fee, which is our fixed fee. For other projects, it's hourly. It's usually dependent on the client. Okay, well, based on the different billing methods, the next part is considering how we invoice for this project work. And there are a couple of common examples. Some of our partners actually bill for hardware up front, and then they bill for labor upon completion. Others may require a down payment, and then they bill the remainder later. And then still others may want to bill bit by bit over time. Now, the ability to bill bit by bit over time is something that's really nice about our fixed fee project work. And that's why I have this progress invoicing example here, because progress invoices are something that we can only create for fixed fee projects. In this example, I have my Eagle Construction, that physical security installation. We had it set up to bill at $20,000 fixed fee. Now you'll notice as I'm in here, I could create an invoice from here. It'd have the invoice date listed as 12/1, which that's going to control our billing terms when this invoice is due. But in order to not create a bill for the full $20,000 the first day this project is created, I'm going to click into Eagle Construction. So click that Eagle Construction hyperlink. Now within, if I go to Actions, I have the ability to create a progress bill, which this means that I can bill any piece of that $20,000 that I'd like right now, and then come back and bill more later. So when I click Progress Bill, it's going to show me the amount that I have, which is the $20,000 value of this project. And then it's going to give me the ability down under WIP bill amount to decide how much of that $20,000 I want to bill now. So I'll manually fill in $5,000. Now this is where an agreement with a client that's trying to fit a larger scale project or a lot of work into their budgets for the year can be really handy, because I can go through and I can agree to them that they'll only pay maybe invoices of $2,500 quarterly, $5,000 monthly, whatever works for their budget, and bit by bit complete the payment for this project. Now when I hit continue, it's going to build out an invoice for me. This is actually an example of the new customer portal invoice, but it'll show that they have a fixed fee project. I'm billing them $5,000 now. And then if you remember the invoice date that I had selected for December 1st, and the terms are going to populate, so they know they have 30 days to pay this invoice, just this first portion. Now, next time I go back in to create a progress bill, it'll say I have $15,000 to bill, and I can choose how much that time. Maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more, just depending on the client's needs and what we've agreed upon. So for additional flexibility, I brought up the idea that while fixed fee projects can be so simple, so handy, you can tell them exactly how much they're going to pay. You can split out that payment through as many individual payments as you need. One thing that can cause problems is scope creep, additional work that needs to be completed that wasn't part of the deal. Well, to solve for that, we actually recommend adding an additional phase and using the cool feature, which is to bill a phase separately. So I'm going to click on that phase link out of scope, and now I'll be able to edit the settings of this phase. Now, any ticket that came through that didn't need to be part of the main project, I would place in this phase so it would follow these billing rules. But essentially I go in and click bill phase separately, and then my billing settings are going to populate. So before I clicked that button, anything in this phase was going to be wrapped up in that $20,000 fixed fee. Now I can say, hey, any ticket that ends up in the out of scope phase, I'm going to have that bill at an override rate of $2.25 an hour. Now this might actually be a discount on our normal hourly rate, so it could still be a nice way to give the client a discount on work that needs to be completed but wasn't part of this original deal, and that will bill separately. We have some additional resources for you. I did want to call out now that if you have any burning questions about projects, please go ahead and throw them into that questions pod, and we'll be happy to cover them in just a moment. But we didn't want to leave you with just this information. We have a blueprint that goes through the project flow, so from creating a project all the way up until invoicing for that project. We also have lessons, which if you're not familiar with lessons on our university, it's more of an interactive way to learn about the material, where you'll be able to test your knowledge and essentially learn the basics of projects. Then if you're looking for more advanced content, more advanced project content with additional business cases, I would highly recommend our Power Your Profits series. We did a whole session on project management, and that webinar might be really helpful. Similar format, just a little bit more advanced content. And then lastly, definitely consider getting certified. Our service certification program is the one that covers project work.
All right, I did see several questions come in throughout the webinar, so we're going to go ahead and start going through those now. I was actually in the middle of typing a response to one, but I'll just go ahead and say the response since we're now at our questions, and that is it better to convert a one cell quote by converting the opportunity or by converting sales orders? So I think this question comes from a lack of understanding of sales orders that I hear from a lot of partners, and that is, when should I be using sales orders? And the answer to that question is it depends on what your needs are. Sales orders actually allow you to do a couple different things. The most common reason I see sales orders used in regards to projects is when there is physical hardware involved in the project that needs to be purchased and likely invoiced before work begins. So whenever you need to invoice for your hardware separately from your labor, this is a good reason to convert your quotes and your opportunities into a sales order before you convert to a project, because the sales order allows that separate invoicing of product from time.
We had another question that was related to resource scheduling. Is there a way to schedule out those resources faster than the drag and drop that I showed in the project dispatch portal? I personally like the drag and drop through the dispatch portal because it is easier to block out members' time and ensure they have the availability. However, there is a mass action in the work plan tab, and I find this especially useful if you're really just assigning responsibility or maybe shifting responsibility from one team member to someone else who has a little bit more availability right now. You can select every ticket on the project, every ticket on a phase, and then use the action to update resources. So you can add a resource and remove a resource from there as well. So that can be really handy when you're trying to make very quick updates, especially if maybe you don't necessarily need to complete the dispatching right now or assign out specific times.
I just saw another question. Where do we add the icons for project statuses? That is in the project board setup table, and I'll show you exactly where that is now. Head to System Setup Tables. I believe it's project board and project status. Let me check project status first. Yeah, so there's two places you actually want to do this. Project status are the statuses available for the project itself. I've gone ahead and added status indicators for all of my statuses, but let's say I wanted to change. Maybe on hold is bigger than an orange for me. I can open it up, and then you'll see status indicator right here. So just select which status icon you would like for each of the statuses. Now this is only half of it. This is just for the project itself. If I head back to my setup tables, go to project board now, open up a board. I'll then want to go to the statuses tab. And I don't have any icons, I think, for these. Yeah, so I haven't set them up yet for this board. So if I open one up, status indicators right over here. And you'll probably want to set these up for all of your statuses. So if you have statuses right now that don't have any indicators, your boards are likely older than this newer status indicator feature. We added this a couple years ago, so you may just have had your project board set up before this had been added in.
One question I saw come through was asking about when should you be creating configurations from the different products you sold. And generally, we want this to happen on the opportunity record after it's been won. So you definitely don't want to be creating configurations saying that a certain customer has, a server, a workstation that they haven't actually purchased yet, or that they haven't actually received. But from the opportunity products tab, you can convert them into configuration records pretty easily.
I saw a question come in. This one's a matter of opinion, so I will share mine, but everyone else who's attending, please feel free to share yours as well. Should product managers apply time to projects when managing and reviewing? In my opinion, yes. It goes back to one of our ConnectWise Manage best practices, all time, all the time, on time. That time matters. The time your project managers are spending reviewing projects is time you're paying them to review. So making sure that time is logged on projects will give you a much more accurate picture of the true cost of the project. Now, that time doesn't necessarily need to be billable depending on how you qualify that time, but in my opinion, it definitely should be tracked on the project because it is time spent on the project.
Yeah, I think if your focus is on billing your customer, I could see where someone would assume that that wasn't necessary. But when you start running reports to kind of pick out your gross margin or maybe decide if you need to increase your rates on projects, it's really difficult to make that call without seeing how much you're spending on this project.
And yes, that time will be tracked against the project budget. Another question I saw back at the start of the session was talking about their process is they typically sell onboarding projects alongside contracts. This is something I had an example of, but I didn't show in detail exactly how this process works. So I'll show you an example of what an opportunity with a contract and a project might look like and how you would convert both of them. So let's see. This looks like a managed services contract. Let's see what products I have on here. Good, hasn't been converted yet. This has a recurring service. Great. It doesn't have any onboarding project, so I'm going to add one on here now just so we can see an example of this side by side. And I'm going to use the simpler example of a bunch of hours. So let's just say this is labor hours, and it's going to take, say, 30 hours of onboarding labor. All right, so now I have my recurring service that needs to be created into an agreement, and my budgeted labor that needs to be created into a project. I want to win my opportunity. That'll update both the opportunity itself and all of the products to 1. Now that they have been won, I now need to convert both. And I can only do one at a time, so we just have to kind of run through this conversion process twice, once for the agreement and then once for the project. For the agreement, we're going to create a brand new one. You see I have both on here, but only my recurring product is selected by default, since we know that's likely the one that we sold for the contract, and that's exactly what I want in this scenario. And I can convert to the agreement, hit finish. And since I already had the agreement type I wanted selected, I can just hit save, and now my agreement is done. I can make any smaller changes here if I need to, but let's say I sold something that matched my template, so I don't have to make any other changes. I'll now come back to my opportunity, and we'll convert one more time, this time to a project, create a brand new one. There's that labor hours. Oh, and onboarding, perfect, that matches the example we were talking with. And since I just have a bunch of hours, let's go ahead and use one of my project templates here to start planning out what the actual work is going to look like. And I'm going to use a ConnectWise Manage template. And do I have an onboarding one? New client onboarding. Perfect. Hit finish, hit save, and now we've converted that one opportunity into both type of records.
Very cool. Another question just came through asking, is it better to create projects with phases or projects with tasks in the product implementation ticket? So just as kind of a high level for anyone who's not familiar, individual tickets can have task lists. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, is it better to have a task list within a ticket or should it be an individual ticket within a phase? And for me, that usually comes down to how many resources are expected to be working on this, because the task list within the ticket is really more of a checklist. So if you have one person who's completing all those tasks and they're assigned to the ticket, they know they're responsible for completing each of those individual tasks. If you have multiple people, there could end up being confusion as to ownership over the task list in the ticket. So if there's going to be multiple resources completing different tasks, I would have them as their own ticket. It just makes it so much easier to schedule and assign accountability.
Next question I saw came in is on the product status report I showed earlier. What setup is needed for the report itself? To manually run the report just on your own, on demand, the only setup you would need, I actually already showed, and that is updating your statuses to have those status icon indicators on there. That way, not only are you seeing them on your work plan, but now they'll also show on that report. Once that is done, it's just going to go ahead and run that report based on the product you're running it against. So I believe it's called product status report. There we go. And I just need to select which project I want to run the report against. I don't remember off the top of my head which of these projects actually have good data. I'm going to try that project I was just working with, but I don't remember if we've actually done any work on it yet. So this one might come back blank for me. But that's all we have to do to actually run the report. To share it out to your customers on a recurring basis, you're going to use this Add to My Reports button right here. Let me go ahead and see how our report turned out first. Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like I haven't done any work on this project yet, so it's coming up blank. But it's ready to schedule and 0% complete. To schedule it out, we use Add to My Reports and Schedule for Future Use. We then fill out this information here to designate who it's going to and on what schedule. And once this is done, we'll go ahead and send that report out on that recurring schedule without any more manual intervention needed. Renee, did you answer the question on setting up a workflow rule for shipping yet?
No, I have not.
All right, let me go ahead and show that off since we have a couple minutes remaining.
Thank you. And then just before everyone leaves, we have some key takeaways right after this explanation.
I'm in the workflow rule setup table. I'm going to create a brand new workflow rule, and it is looking at projects. And I'm giving it a good name so I know why I built this in the future. I'm going to add a new event, which defines what it is looking for. Product has all products received. And let's make it a little fancy and open. It's there. Now for all of my open projects, once all products have been received, this workflow rule will find them. The only thing left is decide what to do. So here I can choose from several different actions based on how I want to respond. Probably sending an email is the fastest, easiest way to share this information. All right, I don't see any more questions, and we're just about out of time, so let me move it over to our key takeaways.
Wanted to leave you guys with just a few items to keep in mind. So first of all, create products and project templates to organize your project work. Remember that products can be set up as phase bundles that'll create a phase with service class items listed as tickets within it and any non-inventory and inventory items in their own separate ticket. Also, you can use project teams set up on the project board to indicate who should be working on this, which makes it really easy to open up that dispatch portal and assign out work to the right team members who actually have availability. And then lastly, remember we have tons of ways to monitor these projects and make sure that we're consistently keeping them updated so that that final bill matches the quote, make sure work is completed on time, and maybe we're billing at specific milestones or specific pieces, specific parts of the project.
Thank you guys all for joining us. I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.